Intel just introduced new CPUs without E-cores. RX 8000 ray tracing is next level. AMD confirms little cores for desktop, and Ryzen 9000 prices are amazing. Welcome everyone to Gamer Meld. Okay, it's news time, and first up for today, Intel, seemingly out of nowhere, released an entire new lineup of CPUs. As you can see right here, these are still 14th gen products, but they have one major difference. All of these lack E-cores. As you can see right down here, there are a ton of new products, and none of them come with E-cores. You can definitely tell by looking at the cores and threads because all of these have hyper-threading and they have exactly double the amount of threads versus cores, while obviously little cores don't have hyper-threading, so this wouldn't add up. All of these are separated as well. They're kind of separated into two groups. You have these with 8 cores and 16 threads, and these with 6 cores and 12 threads. There aren't any that are releasing, at least right now, with 4 cores and 8 threads. Then these are more differentiated among themselves via the TDP amount and clocks. Starting things off, we have the Core i9 14901KE, and of course that has a K, meaning it is overclockable. This one has a boost clock of 5.8 gigahertz and has 125 watt TDP. Then we look at the non-K model. This one has a boost clock of 5.6 gigahertz. Then we have the 14901 TE. This one has a boost clock of 5.5 gigahertz and 45 watt TDP. Then we move down to the i7. These are still 8-core, 16-thread CPUs. This one's the 14701E with a max boost clock of 5.4 gigahertz with a 65 watt TDP. Then we have the 14701 TE, which is obviously also an 8-core, 16-thread CPU with a 5.2 gigahertz boost and 45 watt TDP. Finally, moving down to the 6-core, 12-thread products, we have the 14501E, which comes with a 5.2 gigahertz boost and a 65 watt TDP. Then we have the 14501 TE. This is a 5.1 gigahertz boost with a 45 watt TDP. Then the 14401E. This is 65 watt TDP, but 4.7 gigahertz boost. Finally, we have the 14401 TE. This one, of course, with T being 45 watts, 4.5 gigahertz boost. Now, some of you may be kind of really excited about this because those E-cores, as all of you know, can definitely cause issues with Windows Scheduler, things like that, and they definitely look like they'd be really good in gaming. Unfortunately, at least for now, given the E moniker, we know that these really are ultimately for embedded systems. With that said, there is a chance that retailers will get their hands on these because this is still an LGA 1700 socket CPU, so it should still work in your motherboards, given potentially needing an update to the BIOS. But at least for now, this is ultimately intended for the embedded market. Talk about an odd release. Now, if you like odd things, you can see how odd programming can get with the Thinking in Code course from today's sponsor. Brilliant, the only place I trust to learn computer science, whether it's coding, how large language models work in AI, neural networks, or a number of other computer science courses. But like I've said in the past, the reason I love Brilliant really isn't what they teach, but how they teach. Because unlike other online learning platforms, Brilliant has a hands-on approach that makes learning not only fun, but engaging because you're actually in there doing things yourself. It helps you learn why things work the way they do rather than make you simply memorize answers. There's really no better way to learn. So join me and millions others at brilliant.org/gamermeld or use the QR code and you'll get a 30-day free trial. Plus, when you sign up at brilliant.org/gamermeld, you'll get 20% off your premium membership for life. And next up for today, if you remember a little while back, I covered this story on Sony's upcoming PlayStation 5 Pro, but given the fact that this is, of course, a hardware-based channel, PC hardware-based channel, the main thing I focused on was AMD's APU, and there it's was incredibly impressive sounding. We were talking 2 to 3 times ray tracing, maybe even up to ×4 in some cases. Since then, it does look like this is the case. We've seen multiple other leaks. We've seen major outlets discuss this. So it's definitely looking true. Well, we now have some really big insight into exactly what gives it such wild performance boosts. And this one comes from the well-known leaker, Kepler on Twitter, where he shared this partially redacted list of specs right here, and we'll quickly go over it. We're talking double ray tracing intersect engine, RT instance, node transform, new RT node, ray trace tri-pair optimization. Lots of really interesting stuff. I'm going to sort of quickly go over some of these, but really the important ones that should have a massive impact on performance would be the double ray tracing intersect engine, as well as the new RT node, as well as ray tracing tri-pair optimizations. You can see this one right here could lead to increased GPU processing for Ryzen parallel. Then when we move down here, you can see this could improve processing and require less memory. And this one right here would reduce computation load required to calculate ray triangle intersections. Basically, all of this together should lead up to that 2 to 3 and maybe even 4x performance, specifically in ray tracing in some cases. It looks like they're hoping to not only catch up to NVIDIA, and not just this gen, but next gen, and actually beat it. I mean, 3x performance, I highly doubt that NVIDIA would be able to keep up with that kind of performance, even with their RTX 5000 GPUs. Of course, with that said, time, as always, will tell. And next up, there's a very interesting new interview from Tom's Hardware with AMD's own Mike Clark. This is the engineer who's considered the father of Zen. So if there's anyone to ask this question to, it would be him. And while there are a few interesting questions, the main one I want to focus on is where they ask about compact cores for desktop CPUs. And if you didn't already know, AMD has already announced their next generation Zen 6 architecture, and they've confirmed that it still comes with a little C core, obviously named Zen 6C. Now, if you weren't aware of that, you should definitely make sure you subscribe to GamerMeld and click that bell icon so you can stay up to date on all the latest PC hardware news. When it comes to that question, as you can see right down here, Tom's Hardware specifically asked, when you view Zen 5C compact cores, do you think they only have a place in power-constrained environments, i.e. mobile, or could you see this coming over to desktop PCs where power isn't a consideration? In his answer, he first states, he says, if we keep building the compact cores in the way that we talked about, but then he goes on to say, I don't really know why I'm talking about this as if it's theoretical. We know that that's going to happen. But then he goes on and says, the hard part is really making sure we hit the right frequency point so that it's balanced with however many cores you're going to put down. But let's say you're really good at that. Then there's no reason not to put a compact core on a desktop CPU. Basically, this is almost certainly what they're going to be doing. Personally, I'd argue that they wouldn't even be willing to admit this if they weren't already working on it. And once again, this is coming straight from the father of the Zen architecture. And lastly for today, we're finally getting information on pricing for AMD's next-gen Ryzen 9000 desktop CPUs. Now, I actually have a couple different stories here, and I'm going to start with the happier one, I guess you could say. They're both pretty good, but this one originally comes from an Anatech forum member who apparently knows someone working at Best Buy. So yeah, this is one of those I heard from a friend of a friend sort of scenarios, but they did actually share the text messages, and as you can see, it says, our store has 9000 series in stock now, just waiting for word of release date. July 31st has not been finalized as retail sales for us yet. Now, really quickly, that last part is pretty interesting because, at least according to this, it's sounding like the actual release isn't really July 31st, it's just set to go on sale, but you can't actually get them then. And I will say that I do believe it was Best Buy that actually had these listed with July 31st, but for pre-order. So maybe that's what this means. And then as you can see, it was asked, did you get a lot of stock? And here he stated a lot of 9700X and 9900X, but not very many 9600X or 9950X. Then he asks pricing, and that's where things get very interesting. As you can see right here, if this ends up being true, Intel is in some serious trouble because the Ryzen 9 9950X, according to this, is set to release at $499 US, which is a whopping $200 drop from the 7950X. Then the 9900X at $399, which is a $150 drop from the 7900X, followed by the 9700X at $299. We're looking at a $100 drop there. And finally, the 9600 500X at $229, or a $70 drop in price. Now, I did say that this is the better of the two stories, but the other story is still really good. This one comes from the well-known leaker HXL, where you can see, according to them, the 9950X is set to be under $699, which is still less than the MSRP of the 7950X, so it's still good, but he's claiming it's over $499. Maybe this $499 is just what Best Buy is paying, but obviously they're going to be upping that price a bit to make a profit. Maybe we're looking at, $550, something like that, maybe $600, but either way, it's looking set to be less than last gen, and that's a win for everyone. So while that does it for today, if this pricing does end up being correct, which CPU will you buy? Let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to try out Brilliant for free at brilliant.org/gamermeld. And as always, have a great day.